So just to put it up starkly for you, this plays out in a lower acceptance rate to Russell Group institutions for the least advantaged applicants. So 24% acceptance for those from the most disadvantaged groups, and 41% for the most advantaged. Interestingly, just in context again, 41% acceptance to the Russell Group against 70% across the whole sector. So it's still pretty difficult to get into those institutions, but significantly more for the least advantaged. So if you look at tariff stuff, so it's a similar picture to the one we saw before. This is just to the Russell Group. So a higher proportion of the more disadvantaged with lower tariff rates. And the only thing I can really think of here is this must be about getting either poor advice or probably in many cases no advice at all. There must be some of these applicants who are just simply making uninformed applications to the Russell Group. And it's very clear to me that the access to good information, good advice and good guidance is absolutely critical, and assuming that you've got the achievement at level 3, without that additional advice and guidance, it's very, very difficult to get your application just right. But now I'm going on to what I've come to think of as my killer slide. So I'm now looking at acceptance rates to the Russell Group. So these are people who've applied and been accepted, and this is by tariff. And what you see at the far right of that chart is that even at the higher tariff achievement, for some reason there is a lower acceptance rate for the more deprived groups. And this is where I think we get into really interesting territory, because there's been a huge public debate about this kind of stuff, with Les Ebden being appointed to as the director of offer and threatening the nuclear option, and the Russell Group line is it's all about secondary achievement. Well, this chart, I think, should give them a little pause for thought. I think there is one thing here, that there is some evidence that children from more deprived backgrounds and from schools that aren't as experienced in progression to higher education might be taking the wrong qualifications. So the tariff doesn't tell you if you've got the right kind of qualifications, it just tells you at what level. But thinking about this, so what else? Let's just say we've got all these youngsters from very deprived backgrounds, and don't forget that all universities are under real political pressure to admit these young people. So why aren't they being admitted at the same rates as those from more advantaged backgrounds? And really there's only kind of, I know how the system works, and within selective universities, if you've got the right qualifications, you're on the to be considered pile, then they're going to look at your personal statement, they're going to look at your reference, and they may want to interview you. And I think there's some really interesting territory here for more deprived background groups, because if you've been to a school in a difficult area with very low achievements, if you live in a house perhaps where there are no books and no discussions, your parents haven't been to higher education, you don't have friends or family who've got any experience of the higher education system that we all take for granted. You may not go abroad for holidays, you may not go on school trips. What do you write in your personal statement compared to somebody from a middle-class family who does have all those advantages and who can get who can get that broader social context into their education and write about it in their personal statement? And of course, references, who knows what kind of references. I've taken to browsing personal statements and references in my spare time, which is, unfortunately, I can't do it at home. They won't let me access the data, so I don't have much time at my desk. But I thought that letter from a state school applicant to Oxford, I think it was, back a few months back, where the applicant wrote to Oxford to reject them. And I thought it was absolutely classic, and it was easy to laugh at it. But I thought there was a very strong underlying theme there, that these young people from very deprived backgrounds without much support, how on earth would they prepare themselves for an interview situation like that? So I thought it'd be interesting to have a look at how the universities themselves help applicants prepare themselves. What advice do they give about interviews and personal statements and so on? I deliberately didn't look at Wolverhampton's website. I'm sure it's absolutely top quality, but I've got a few little extracts here. So one helpful university tells applicants that we're looking for articulate, well-read people with wide and lively intellectual interests, whose engagement with literature covers more than a single... And that's pretty much all it says to tell you what to write in your personal statement. How about interviews? I thought this was really helpful advice. The interview structure may vary, as we're presently transitioning from multiple mini-interview format, MMI, it helpfully tells you, so the applicant could receive either kind of interview. And another one here. All applicants under considerations are invited to attend a short informal interview at an applicant open day. The interview is used to assess your motivation to study the programme and your ability to formulate opinions on relevant topics. Well, I'm sure that's a huge amount of help. Another one I looked at. We receive very large numbers of applications and have to turn down, almost without exception, applicants without such predictions. Exceptions are usually made only for applicants eligible for a widening participation scheme. Now put yourself in the boots of a widening participation applicant. I mean, would you know that you were a widening has anybody other than us in HE ever heard of this term, widening participation? It's jargon. It's absolutely meaningless. Well, let's just say this highly intelligent youngster clicks on the widening participation scheme and finds out whether they're eligible or not. And this is the kind of thing. So, I mean, this kind of list, basically, it says, well, are you happy to be selected on the basis that you're poor, that your parents are poorly educated, that you go to a lousy school, you live in a very bad area, and you've perhaps had some kind of personal crisis on top of that. I think that must be what it feels like. And actually, I don't know if any of you heard The Moral Maze recently, and I thought Claire Fox, who's a firebrand left-winger, but I thought she put it really well. I'm very glad nobody took account of my accent, my social background, or investigated my parents' lack of education to do me a favour, because I would never have been taken seriously. I'm all for storming the ivory towers, but not for destroying them. So I think there is something here for somebody to do something about, and it's probably not for me to do anything about it. Although I shall try by dubious means, no doubt, to get the message across. There is something here about getting websites. You know, if there isn't even the basic information there, then it's going to be difficult for young people to get the right advice and guidance. And the thing here, I think it's really important. I almost want to kind of rename admissions, because admissions is what you do in kind of, when you're going to primary school or secondary school, where you've got a right to be educated up to the age of 16, 17 now, soon to be 18. But actually what we're doing here is not admissions, it is selection. even for the so-called